Bonnie. I guess you could say I was the anchor for my group of friends. It was me, Jason, Curtis, and a couple of other guys. We'd known each other for years, since we were all trying to figure out what to do with our lives. I was always the one planning things, picking the bar for Friday nights, choosing the movie for our weekend hangouts. They were good guys, really. Just a bit clueless sometimes. I felt like I was doing them a favor, sort of guiding them. We'd watch a movie, and I'd have to be the one to point out the obvious sexism, the way the female characters were written, just to serve the male protagonist. They'd be like, "Wow, I never even noticed that." And I'd feel like I was opening their eyes. It was my role. I was their friend who helped them be better men. Jason, in particular, always seemed to get it. He was the thoughtful one, the one who'd listen intently when I talked about the systemic pressures on women or the subtle signs of toxic masculinity. Curtis was more of a follower. He'd just nod along with whatever Jason and I were saying, but he seemed to mean well. Life was comfortable. I had my circle. I was the witty, smart girl in a group of guys who respected my opinion. They'd come to me for advice about dating. I'd tell them which girls were waving red flags, which ones seemed to have their own lives and weren't just looking for a guy to complete them. My approval meant something, and I liked that. It felt earned. Our usual routine was a pub on a Friday. We had our corner booth. I'd get there, and they'd all be waiting. We'd talk for hours about work, about annoying people we knew, about some dumb thing that happened that week. It was easy. It was stable. Then, maybe a few months back, I started to notice Jason was a little off. He was quieter in our group chat. He'd bail on plans last minute, which was not like him at all. Just vague excuses like not feeling it tonight or gotta get some stuff done. I asked Curtis if he knew what was up. He just shrugged and said Jason was probably just busy with that new project at his job. I didn't buy it. This felt different. It felt like he was pulling away. I tried to talk to him about it in a casual way. Sent him a text. "Everything good? You've been a ghost lately." He replied hours later with a, "Yeah, all good. Just been swamped. Let's all hang out soon." It was a total non-answer. My gut told me something was going on he wasn't sharing. Finally, a couple of weeks later, he shows up to our Friday night pub meeting, and he's not alone. He walks in with a girl. My first thought was, okay, here we go. Let's see who he picked. Her name was Rena. She was Japanese. She was very pretty in a delicate, quiet way. Small, polite smile, barely made eye contact. Jason introduced her to everyone, and she just did this little bow-like nod. I immediately went into analysis mode. I extended my hand for a handshake, trying to be warm and welcoming. Her handshake was limp. Barely there. First red flag. We all sat down, and the dynamic was instantly weird. I tried to draw her into our conversation. I asked her what she did for a living. She said she was a florist in a soft voice. Okay, a florist. That's quaint. I asked her what she was passionate about, what drove her. She thought for a moment and said she enjoyed cooking and ikebana, the Japanese art of flower arranging. The conversation just died after that. She didn't elaborate. She didn't ask me any questions back. She just sat there, nursing a single glass of wine, smiling faintly whenever Jason looked at her. He was completely smitten. He kept putting his arm around her, whispering things in her ear that made her giggle. It was like watching a different person. This wasn't the Jason I knew, the one who would debate movie theories with me for an hour. This was a simpler, dumber version of him. Later in the evening, I got a moment with him alone when she went to the restroom. "So, Rena," I started, trying to sound breezy. "She seems nice." He lit up. "Isn't she great? She's just so calm, so different from everyone I've ever dated." I knew everyone he's ever dated was a subtle dig at the kind of women I usually approved of. Strong, opinionated, ambitious. "She's definitely calm," I said. "A little too quiet for my taste, but you do you. Does she have any big career goals, or is she happy just arranging flowers?" The look on his face shifted, just a little. The smile tightened. "She loves what she does," he said defensively. "It's art. It makes her happy." I held up my hands. "Hey, no judgment. Just curious. It's just, you've always been so driven. I figured you'd want someone who challenges you, you know?" He didn't answer. He just watched Rena walk back to the table. The rest of the night was awkward. I tried to bring up our usual topics, but the energy was gone. Rena's silent presence was like a black hole sucking all the interesting conversation out of the room. The next few weeks were a parade of this new reality. If we wanted to see Jason, we had to see Rena. They were a package deal. We had a picnic in the park one Saturday. I suggested everyone bring something to share. I brought a fancy bottle of wine and some artisanal cheese. Curtis brought a bag of chips. Rena showed up with a multi-layered bento box filled with perfectly crafted onigiri, tamagaki, and little octopus-shaped sausages. Everyone was fawning over it. "Wow, Rena, you made all this?" She just blushed and nodded. I couldn't help myself. I had to say something. "This is amazing, Rena. Jason, you've got yourself a real keeper. It's like something out of the 1950s, I said with a laugh, trying to make it sound like a compliment. The laughter died in my throat. Nobody else laughed. Jason gave me a look that was pure ice. Rena looked down at her hands, her face unreadable. It was the first time I felt like an outsider in my own group. The incident just made me double down. I felt like I had to show Jason what he was getting into. I started making more jokes. When Rena would clean up Jason's plate for him at a barbecue, I'd say, "Don't get too used to that 5-star service." When she mentioned she was learning how to do a traditional tea ceremony, I asked if the next step was learning how to walk 3 paces behind her man. I thought it was funny. I thought I was being edgy and pointing out the obvious patriarchal undertones of it all. But the guys just got quiet. Jason stopped responding to my texts entirely, unless it was in the group chat. Our one-on-one friendship was completely gone. He had replaced it with her. I thought at least Curtis would be on my side. He'd always been my backup. But then the unthinkable happened. Curtis met someone. He announced it in the group chat with a picture of the two of them. Her name was Lynn. She was Vietnamese. My heart sank. Not again. I steeled myself for another Rena, another quiet, demure wallflower. But Lynn was the complete opposite. She was loud. She was funny. She worked in IT and was a total tech nerd. The first time I met her, I thought, okay, maybe this one will be different. Maybe Curtis made a smart choice. Lynn could actually hold a conversation. She had opinions. We talked about a new sci-fi show, and she was just as into it as I was. For a second, I felt a wave of relief. This was fine. I could handle this. But then I started to watch her with Curtis. It was the same dynamic as Jason and Rena, just in a different font. She was incredibly attentive to him. She'd praise his accomplishments at work to the rest of us, telling stories that made him sound like a hero. She'd touch his arm when he was talking, always focused on him, making him feel like the most important person in the room. She managed her own successful career, but when she was with him, her priority was clearly his comfort and his ego. It baffled me. She was this smart, capable woman, and she was still performing this traditional, supportive girlfriend role. It clicked for me then. It wasn't about being quiet or loud, ambitious or not. It was about this deliberate choice to be non-confrontational, to be nurturing, to make the man the center of the relationship. It was a calculated strategy, and it was working on my friends. They were falling for it, hook, line, and sinker. My panic started to set in for real. This wasn't just Jason making a weird choice. This was a pattern, a trend. The group completely fractured. It became Jason and Rena and Curtis and Lynn. They started going on double dates. Pictures would pop up on social media. The 4 of them at a fancy restaurant. The 4 of them hiking. They looked so disgustingly happy, content. The rest of us were an afterthought. I tried to organize a classic just us night, like old times. I texted the group, "Pub night this Friday, no partners, just the original crew. Let's get rowdy." Dead silence for hours. Finally, Jason replied, "Rena and I have plans, sorry." Curtis followed up a minute later. "Yeah, Lynn and I are hosting a game night. You guys should come over." He was inviting me into their world. He didn't even understand that I was trying to save our world, the one they were abandoning. I felt a rage I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a feeling of being replaced, of being made obsolete. My role in the group was gone. They didn't need my guidance anymore. They didn't want my sharp, critical perspective. They wanted soft voices and easy praise. They wanted comfort, not challenges. I felt betrayed. I had invested years in these friendships, in shaping these guys into decent, thoughtful men, and they threw it all away for women who would just coddle their most basic instincts. I decided I had to do something more direct. The jokes and sarcastic comments weren't working. I needed to have a real conversation with someone. I needed to break through. I chose Curtis. He was always the more impressionable one. I caught him on a day I knew he was working from home. I called him, pretending I needed advice on some tech issue. After we sorted that out, I steered the conversation. "So, you and Lynn seem pretty serious," I said, trying to sound casual. He immediately got enthusiastic. He went on and on about how great she was, how smart, how supportive. I let him finish. Then I went in. "I'm really happy for you, Curtis. I am," I said, putting as much sincerity into my voice as I could. "But as your friend, I have to admit I'm a little concerned." There was a pause on the other end. "Concerned? About what?" "It's just this whole dynamic. First Jason with Rena, now you with Lynn. It feels like you guys are actively seeking out a certain type of woman." "A certain type?" he asked, and his voice was colder now. "You know," I said, trying to choose my words carefully, "women who are less demanding, more traditional. It's a classic move for guys who are intimidated by strong, independent women. They go for women who won't challenge them, who will just admire them unconditionally." The silence on the other end was heavy. I thought I might have actually gotten through to him. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "You think I'm intimidated by Lynn?" he said. "Bonnie, Lynn is a senior developer at a major tech company. She could probably buy and sell me twice over. She's not a pushover." "I'm not talking about her job," I pressed on, feeling a bit desperate. "I'm talking about the way she acts around you, the way Rena acts around Jason. It's a performance. Can't you see it? It's the perfect girlfriend act, and it's not real." "What's not real about it?" he shot back. "That she's nice to me? That she actually seems to like me? That she doesn't treat every conversation like it's a debate she needs to win?" The jab was so direct, it felt like a slap in the face. "That's not fair, Curtis," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I'm just trying to be a good friend. I'm trying to look out for you." "No, you're not," he said, and all the usual softness was gone from his tone. "You're not looking out for me. You just don't like that I'm happy with someone who isn't you, or someone you would have picked for me. Lynn isn't performing. She's just kind. She supports me. She doesn't spend all her time pointing out my flaws or the flaws of the world. Sometimes a guy just wants to come home to some peace, you know?" he continued, his voice getting stronger. "For years I listened to you. I thought you knew everything. But now I see that you don't know anything about what makes people happy. You only know how to criticize." I was stunned. I couldn't even form a reply. "I have to go," he said. "Lynn's bringing home dinner. We're going to watch a movie, a dumb one, probably, one you would hate." And then he hung up. I just sat there, holding my phone, listening to the dial tone. It was worse than I thought. I hadn't just been replaced. I had been judged. My friendship, my advice, my entire personality had been weighed and found wanting. They didn't see me as their smart, witty guide anymore. They saw me as the source of the conflict they were so happy to be escaping. That night, I scrolled through my phone, looking at old pictures of our group, pictures from years ago. All of us smiling, laughing, me in the middle, always. It felt like looking at a different life, a life where I was important, a life where I mattered to them. I saw a new post from Lynn. It was a picture of her and Curtis, and Jason and Rena, all crowded onto a sofa, playing some board game. They were all laughing, genuinely, truly happy. And I was completely, utterly alone. I realized then that this wasn't something I could fix with a clever comment or a pointed question. This was a fundamental shift, a rebellion. They were choosing a different way of life, and I was the person they were leaving behind. The worst part was the dawning horror that maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe my guidance wasn't helpful. Maybe it was just exhausting. The thought was so terrifying I pushed it away almost immediately. No, I was right. They were wrong. They were just weak. They had taken the easy way out, choosing comfort over consciousness. And if they couldn't see that, then they weren't the men I thought they were. They weren't the friends I thought I had. But that thought didn't bring me any comfort. It just made the silence in my apartment feel even louder. I knew something had to break. I couldn't just fade away into the background. I had to confront them, all of them. I had to make them see what they were giving up. I started planning. I needed the right time, the right place. I needed one last chance to make them understand, to make them choose. And I was terrified of what that choice would be. The days after that phone call with Curtis were a blur. I felt like I was living in a fog. I'd go to work, come home, and just stare at the walls. The group chat, once a constant stream of memes and plans, was a graveyard. Every notification that wasn't from them made my stomach clench. I kept replaying the conversation with Curtis in my head. "You only know how to criticize." The words were like a brand. Was that how they all saw me, as some kind of nagging critic? I wasn't criticizing, I was helping. I was elevating the conversation. They were the ones who had changed, not me. They'd gotten lazy. It was easier to be praised for mediocrity than to be challenged to be better. I understood that. But it was still disappointing. I spent a lot of time scrolling through their social media profiles. It was a form of self-punishment, I think. There was a photo of Rena and Jason at some kind of botanical garden. She was looking at a flower, and he was looking at her like she was the entire world. It made me physically sick. There was a video Curtis posted of Lynn teaching him a few words in Vietnamese. He was stumbling over the pronunciation, and she was laughing. A real, genuine laugh. They looked happy. It felt like they were rubbing it in my face. "Look how happy we are without you. Look how easy it is." I tried to reach out to the other guys in the group, the ones who were more on the periphery. I sent a casual text to one of them. "Hey, haven't seen you in forever. We should grab a beer." He took a full day to reply. "Hey, Bonnie. Yeah, things have been crazy. Maybe sometime soon." It was the ultimate brush-off. Sometime soon means never. I was being systematically cut out, ghosted by my own friends. My anger started to curdle into something else, something colder, a resolve. I couldn't let it end like this. I couldn't let them just drift away into their little world of domestic bliss and leave me with nothing. I deserved an explanation, not from one of them on the phone, but from all of them, to my face. I needed them to see me, to see what they were throwing away. The opportunity came about a week later. I was scrolling through Instagram before bed, a habit I knew I needed to break, and I saw it. A post from one of Curtis's work friends that he was tagged in. It was a picture of a round of drinks on the familiar wooden table of our old favorite pub. The caption read, "Celebrating Curtis's big promotion. Well-deserved, man." In the background, out of focus, I could see them. I could make out Jason's arm, what looked like Rena's hair, and several of the other guys. They were all there, at our pub, celebrating a major life event for one of my oldest friends. And I wasn't invited. I hadn't even known he got a promotion. The betrayal was so sharp, so absolute, it took my breath away. This was it. This was the final straw. I wasn't going to sit in my apartment and see their secondhand happiness through a screen. I was going to go there. I got dressed. I didn't even think about what I was wearing. My hands were shaking as I put on my shoes. All I could think was, they're gonna hear me. Tonight, they're gonna listen. The walk to the pub was maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Every step was filled with a mix of rage and dread. I rehearsed what I was going to say in my head. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to be calm. I was going to be rational. I was going to lay out the facts of their betrayal so clearly that they couldn't deny it. I got to the window of the pub and looked in. There they were, crowded into our old booth. Jason and Rena were sitting next to each other, sharing a plate of fries. She'd laugh and he'd smile. Curtis and Lynn were across from them. He had his arm draped across the back of the booth behind her, and she was leaning into him, showing him something on her phone. The other two guys were there, laughing at something Curtis said. The scene was so perfect, so complete. A happy whole group of friends. And it was like I had never existed. Like the spot where I was supposed to be sitting had just vanished. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and walked in. The noise of the pub hit me, but it all sounded distant, muffled. My focus was entirely on that table. I walked towards them. One of the other guys saw me first. His smile froze on his face. He nudged Curtis. Curtis looked up, and his expression just dropped. All the joy drained out of him. He said my name, Bonnie, and it wasn't a greeting. It was an alarm. Everyone at the table turned to look at me. Jason's face became a stony mask. Rena looked down at the table, and Lynn just watched me with a neutral, unreadable expression. The conversation stopped. The laughter stopped. I had their attention. I stood at the edge of the table, looking at all their faces. "So, this is it," I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. "This is the new group, celebrating promotions, having fun, just like old times, except you forgot to send me an invite." Curtis started to stammer something. "Bonnie, it wasn't, I cut him off. "Save it. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. I looked directly at Jason and Curtis. I cannot believe what you've become, I said, my voice dripping with a disappointment I didn't have to fake. I look at you, and I don't even recognize you anymore. I gestured with my hand towards Rena and Lynn. You've traded years of real solid friendship for this, for comfort, for easy mode. I could feel the anger building, my plan to stay calm evaporating. I spent years trying to teach you, to help you navigate the world as decent men. I defended you. I explained things to you. I thought we were building something, a friendship based on mutual respect and intellectual honesty. My voice was rising now, and people at the nearby tables were starting to look over. I didn't care. And what do? The second it gets a little hard, the second you're asked to do a little bit of self-reflection, you run. You run straight to the most regressive, stereotypical fantasy you can find. I looked at Rena. A woman who lives to serve you, who makes your lunch and tells you how great you are. I looked at Lynn. And you're just a more modern version of the same thing. You pat him on the head and tell him he's a big, strong man. You're both playing a part. I turned my attention back to my friends. And you're eating it up, because you're weak. You're terrified of a woman who might actually challenge you. A woman who might have her own opinions and not be afraid to voice them. You are so scared of a real, equal partnership with a woman like me that you had to go find women who would basically cosplay as your mothers. I finished, breathing heavily, my heart pounding in my chest. I had said it. I had laid it all out. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. They all just stared at me. Curtis looked hurt. Jason looked empty. It was Jason who spoke first. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sound angry at all. He sounded tired. So incredibly tired. You're wrong, Bonnie, he said, his voice flat and even. You've got it all wrong. He looked at me, and his eyes were completely devoid of the warmth they used to hold. We're not scared of strong women, he said slowly, deliberately. We're tired of angry ones. We're tired of the constant negativity. He leaned forward slightly. For years, every single thing we did, every movie we watched, every story we told, was put on trial by you. Every interaction was a test of our morals, our politics, our very character. And it was a test we always failed, no matter how hard we tried. He gestured vaguely around the table. You weren't our friend, you were our warden, our self-appointed educator, and we were just your failing students. He looked over at Rena, and his expression softened for just a second. Rena isn't weak, she's kind. She doesn't see life as a battlefield. She finds joy in things. She creates beautiful things. She brings peace. With her, I don't have to constantly be on guard, worried I'm going to say the wrong thing and get a lecture. I can just be. He leaned back, his part said. The finality in his tone was like a door slamming shut. Then Curtis spoke up. He wouldn't quite meet my eyes. He looked at the table in front of him. He's right, he said quietly. You say Lynn supports me like it's a bad thing. When I was stressing about this promotion, I was a mess. Lynn stayed up with me, helped me practice my presentation, and told me she believed in me. She didn't tell me I was suffering because of the patriarchy or that my ambition was a symptom of toxic masculinity. She just helped. He finally looked up at me, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes. We didn't want a teacher anymore, Bonnie. We wanted partners, and you were never interested in being a partner. You were only ever interested in being right. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Their words were hitting me, but I couldn't process them. It felt like they were speaking a different language. Then came the final, killing blow. It came from one of the other guys, the quietest one, who I don't think I'd had a real conversation with in over a year. He was just always there. He looked at me. No anger, no pity, just a simple, devastating statement of fact. Honestly, Bonnie, he said, it's easier to breathe when you're not around. That was it. That was the line that broke through all my defenses. Easier to breathe. I had no response. There was nothing to say. My entire case, my entire righteous crusade, had been dismantled by a few simple, honest sentences. I stood there for a moment, my mouth half open, trying to find a word, an argument, anything. But there was nothing. I looked at their faces one last time. They weren't my friends anymore. They were strangers, and they were looking at me like I was the problem. I turned around without another word and walked out of the pub. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't turn. The cool night air felt strange on my hot face. I walked home in a daze. I don't remember the journey. I got back to my apartment and closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in the silence. My apartment. My quiet, empty apartment. I had spent so much energy fighting, proving my point, being the strong one. I had won every argument, but I had lost every friend. I sat on my sofa in the dark. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over my social media apps. I knew if I opened them, I'd eventually see a picture of them, all of them, laughing, continuing their night after I left, breathing easier. I had built my identity on being an independent woman who didn't need anyone, a woman who was strong enough to stand alone. And now I was. I was completely, totally, and utterly alone. And for the first time, I had a terrifying thought that had nothing to do with feminism or patriarchy or any of the big ideas I used to build my walls. It was a simple, quiet thought. This is not a victory.